In this lesson, we're going to write and graph compound inequalities. All right, compound inequalities. So compound inequality consists of two separate inequalities, and they're going to be joined by and or. So let's talk a little bit about the compound inequality where we have the word and. It says anyone who is at least 14 years old and is not older than 18 may attend the dance. And so we're writing those inequalities where we have the and with the variable sandwiched in between. And notice on our graph that we've got two inequalities that come together and they're like a sandwiched together. And we're going to talk more about that in detail in just a minute. Now then we also have the compound inequalities that we have the word or. So discounts available at the movie theater if you are elderly, 65 or over, or under 12. Notice how the ones where you've got the compound inequalities with the word or, they're just two separate inequalities that are written with the word or in between it. And then also notice how they're on the graph, that those are going in two separate directions. You've got that less than 12, and then you've got the greater than or equal to 65. All right, example 1. How do I write and graph a compound inequality? So we're going to translate the verbal phrase into an equality, and then we're going to graph the inequality. So it says, all real numbers that are less than or equal to 7 or greater than or equal to 10. So notice that the or ones, that we're writing them as just two separate inequalities, and we're just placing the or between them. So we'll write our first inequality. It says all real numbers that are less than or equal to 7. So let's start by writing x is less than or equal to 7. All right, that's the first part of the inequality. Now we're going to place the word or between it. And then it says greater than or equal to 10. So we're going to write a whole separate inequality off to the right there where x is then greater than or equal to 10. All right, so now let's go ahead and we're going to locate a 7 and let's go locate a 10. And so we're going to then graph x is less than or equal to 7, so it's going to be a solid dot going to the left. And then or x is greater than or equal to 10. So I'm going to have a solid dot again, and then I'm going to go greater. I do want you to notice that the solutions are always going to be in the shaded areas, so that these areas right in here, like the 8 and the 9, those would not be solutions to the inequality because it's not in the shaded area. All right, for question number 2, it says all real numbers that are greater than -1 and less than or equal to 1. So for the ones where we have the and, remember the and ones are where they're sandwiched in, the variables sandwiched between the two numbers. So I'm going to have my x. I'm going to put my smaller number on the left, and I'm going to put my bigger number on the right. So that's how I always do these when I write the ands. Now I like to do the less than or equal to part first, the less than, or it could be less than or equal to first, because I'm going to just write this part of the inequality over here where it says x is less than or equal to 1. And we've been doing that for a while. Now, when we go and write the greater than -1 part, we're writing this inequality backwards because it's sandwiched in the middle. So to write it backwards, I have to have the bigger side facing that x. So how I read this is x is less than or equal to 1, because I want that direction, and x is greater than or equal to -1. And notice how this big side is facing the x. So on our number line, how that looks is I'd have a -1 and I'd have a 1. And because I've got the greater than, and then I've got less than or equal to, so I'm going to have one open and one closed. And so if I were to graph this part right here, I'd be saying, okay, x is less than or equal to 1, and I've got to then turn around, and remember we're going greater than and greater than. So the and ones are always sandwiched in the middle when you have the graph, and the or ones are always pointing out. All right, question number 3, it says all real numbers that are less than -3 or greater than 0. So remember, the or ones, you just have them separated by the word or. So let's rate the first part. All real numbers that are less than -3. All right, x is less than -3. And then remember, you have to have the word or sandwiched between. Now to write the greater than 0, you have to write the variable again, and then you'll just have greater than 0. So on your number line, you would then locate the -3 and the 0. And it looks like they're both less than and greater than. There's no equal to, so they're both going to be open circles. And remember, the ors, they the graphs are going to go separate from each other. So I'm going to have x is less than -3 or greater than 0. All right. For number 4, it says all real numbers that are less than 9 and greater than or equal to 7. So again, remember, we're going to sandwich our variable in the middle. And notice how the 9's coming first and the 7's coming second. I like to put them in order. So I would be putting my smaller number on the left, my bigger number on the right, and because it's an and, the variable is sandwiched in the middle. So let's go ahead and read the first part where it's the less than. So all real numbers that are less than 9. So that we're writing just the same way we did in the first part of the chapter. And then we have and greater than or equal to 7. So greater than or equal to 7, as we're reading it going backwards, because remember, you're going and you're going this direction to read it. And because we came upon the big side, we know that it's going to be then greater than going that direction. Now, I do want to point out that whenever you have these inequality symbols for the and, they're always going to be facing in the same direction. They're not both less thans. It's because you're reading the one going to the right and you're reading one going to the left. But they're always going to face in the same direction. So if you get them confused, I always like to write the less than first, and then I know that the greater than is going to be facing the same way as that less than. So now we'll graph it. So we have a 7 and we have a 9. And the 7 is it's also an equal to, and then it's just less than for 9. And then remember, the ands are always coming in together because I went less than, and then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to go greater than. So notice how you've got the solution is sandwiched in between. All right, example number 2, we're going to sketch and graph the inequality. So notice that this one, let's go ahead and we're going to write the word and up here. So let's write and because we know that it's sandwiched in the middle. All right, so we know that our graph is going to be sandwiched in the middle. So let's locate the -3 and the 7. I don't know if I'm not going to count how many spaces if I'm doing that correctly, but all right. Now I have x is less than 7 and greater than -3. So neither one of them have the line under it. So I do know that I'm going to have open circles. All right. And so now I'm going to then shade everything that goes in the middle. Because if I wanted to say x is less than 7, it goes this way. If I want to say x is greater than -3, it's going this direction. And remember, the and ones are always sandwiched in between. So for number 2, this would be a good time to pause the video again and for you to then do the graph and then take a look to see how you did. All right, so again, you probably noticed that this was an and because it's sandwiched in between. So you're going to have a 1 and a 5 on your number line. And both of these are less than or equal to and greater than or equal to, so I'm going to have closed dots. And to say x is less than or equal to, I'd be going to the left. And remember, we're reading it going this direction. X is greater than or equal to, I'm going to then, everything will be sandwiched in the middle for the ands. All right, for question number 3, it says x is less than -6 or x is greater than or equal to 2. So these are the ors, and we know that the ors, when you have an or, that the graphs go apart. So I'm going to then, let's locate the -6. I'm not sure where the 2 is. We'll just go right there. All right, and 2. All right, so I've got the two separate inequalities. I have x is less than -6, so it's going to be open. Going to the left. And then I have x is greater than or equal to 2 because I've got the equal sign underneath there that's also shaded. And then I'm going to go to the right for the greater than. All right. And now it would be a good idea for you to pause the video again and to try this next one and then come back and see how you did on writing number 4. All right, again, this is an OR. And let's locate our 8 and our 11. And so we're going to start with the x is less than 8. So, all right, so we're going to have an open circle going to the left. And then x is greater than 11. You're going to have an open circle and going to the right. All right, example number 3, write an inequality represented by the graph. All right, so notice how the graphs are going out. So we know that this is going to be an OR. So we know right away that this is an OR. And so let's go ahead then, and we're going to write the two separate inequalities in. We have x is less than -3 because it's open, or x is greater than 0. And then you're all done. Now let's notice for the next one that this is an and because they're coming together. So, and when I do these, I like to write them right underneath the graph. So I'm just going to put the -1 right here. Oops, I need to go the right. All right, so I've got a -1 right here, and I've got a 3 right here. And remember, they're where the variable is sandwiched in between. So I'm just going to come here, and I'm going to put my x. And again, I always like to start with the less than. So I notice how I've got open, and I'm going to the left. So to write that, I would just have less than. Now again, we're writing this in terms of the variable, and so I have to say x is greater than -1, and so, or I should say greater than or equal to, because again, you're reading it going this direction, x is greater than or equal to -1. So x is less than 3 and greater than or equal to -1. All right, so if you have time, it would be good for you to stop the video again and to write these two inequalities and then come back and check your work. So notice how the first one is an OR because they're separated, going separate two different directions, and then notice how the second, or the number 4, is an AND. So for the one where we've got the OR, we're going to just write two separate inequalities. So I'm going to have x is less than 0 because it's open, or x is greater than or equal to 3 because it was closed. For the AND ones, remember, we're sandwiching the variable in the middle. I'm going to put a 0 right here. I'm going to put a -4 over here. And again, I'm going to be looking at this part first. Notice how I'm going less than, and it's actually going to be less than or equal to because it's solid. And then I'm going to have x is greater than -4 because again, remember, you're reading it going backwards. And a good way then, remember I had mentioned, to make sure you've written these right, is that these are always going to be shaded in, or they're going to face the same direction. Even though one's less than and one's greater than, you're just reading the other one backwards. So in this lesson, we took a look at how to write and how to graph compound inequalities.